afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for coming along. So as I say at the outset, it's a bit unfortunate insofar as there's a clash of events today. Another very important event taking place in the Dáil Chamber, where the families of the Stardust victims are all in attendance in the gallery, and just at 2 o'clock there, Letitia gave a very heartfelt apology on behalf of the state, and party leaders are all speaking now. So it's a little bit unfortunate because our attendance will probably be down because of that, but certainly welcome those of you who are here representing different TVs, and there's a handout, and I'll also circulate that to TDs and senators and their staff after this session. So as I say, thanks very much for coming along. We're having a presentation today from SaferBirthsIreland, and that's an umbrella body, collective, made up of Féileacáin, AIDS Ireland, the Birthrights Alliance, and also the involvement of CM Haughey solicitors. So as a collective, this organisation are calling for an inquiry into baby deaths, maternal deaths and catastrophic birth injuries. And I suppose that campaign is based on media reports of various inquests that were held. They have compiled a database of baby deaths and identified repeated concerns with CTG monitoring, non-adherence to basic standards and guidelines, delayed deliveries, and women who are not being listened to. They've also identified multiple deaths in a small cohort of hospitals, and there's very little information, I think, available on those. So far, the Minister for Health has appeared to be unwilling to engage or consider any sort of look back on those deaths and injuries. I think there's a fair deal of work now to be done to put this item on the political agenda, to campaign for TDs and senators to get it behind the campaign and to make it a political issue with the government and specifically with the Minister for Health. So we have a number of speakers here today at our top table, and I'm going to just introduce you to them and we'll get underway then. Claire Cullen, next to me here from SaferBirthsIreland, Christia Lynch from AIDS Ireland, Mary Cregan from Féileacáin, Lisa Ann Wilkinson, Barrister at Law, Rachel Birmingham, Birthrights Alliance Ireland, and Cueva Haughey from CM Haughey. So before we have the contributions, I'm just going to start a video which will be running in the background, which the group have asked me to arrange for. So we just put that on.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for everyone coming here today. I am reading off a script and I'm not used to this, so I'll do my best to keep my eyes up. Good afternoon. Let us first extend our appreciation to you all who are in attendance here today, and especially Deputy Shortall for representing us here in the AV room. My name is Claire Cullen and I am co-founder of SaferBirthsIreland along with Ms. Lisa Duffy, who is here also. And we're trying to bring your attention to the much needed quality and patient safety changes that we feel are necessary within the maternity system, also within its investigative system and the legal system related to maternity care failures. We have one simple ask, and that is that we are requesting the commissioning of a national independent inquiry into baby deaths, maternal deaths and birth injuries, and we wish for those findings to be then published so that a clear and transparent approach towards change in maternity, in the maternity system can occur. It is unfortunate that we find ourselves in this situation here today and having to go to these lengths in order for the Minister of Health and the Department of Health to initiate an inquiry. However, this is the system that we are used to, and as service users of the HSE, we feel and we continue to be disregarded or sidelined, unfortunately, by the system. So in that, when we speak to organisations, we want to highlight just our approach and how we are dealt with. As individuals, we don't necessarily get or receive responses directly to our questions when we seek answers in regards to our care deficits or our own individual cases. Instead, we are bombarded with information of how things work in the maternity system now. And we are supplied often with just direct quotes of documents or policies, strategies or guidelines that are actually in place and that are already in the public domain for us to source. As well as that, we are also advised of what is currently implemented. So we heard last week of the launch of the new Women's Health Action Plan 2024 to 2025. And we note with that and ask today that the inquiry is added to the agenda along with the findings, so that our voices and the shared experiences are expressed and heard within that also. We asked the Minister last year to do a basic look back over a number of avoidable deaths. And we hope that after today he will back our calls for the commission of an investigation. Our call for a look back was followed by the discovery of ourselves and a reporter from the Irish Examiner of a list of 21 avoidable baby deaths since January 2013. And since then, of December of last year, that has grown from 21 to 45 with our research. And these 45 baby deaths could all have been prevented and could all have been avoided. Had the right training been there, had the guidelines been abided and the standards, and had the mother been listened to. Yet it was found that all mistakes that could have been easily prevented. And this information is available for everyone here today to source publicly. And we simply ask the Minister to review the trends that are clearly there in large numbers throughout these deaths. The Minister did respond to us in regards to this look back review inquiry, and via RT Radio he advised that there was no trends, no CTG trends at all. And we just want to highlight within those 45 baby deaths that there were actually numerous trends. There was heart monitoring, an issue in 19 of them. There was 14 delayed deliveries, 13 were births after there was a delayed diagnosis of one condition or another. The signs of labour were missed in 6 cases, including when the woman told the staff that she was in labour, and in the aftermath they felt that they were dismissed and ignored. There were cases of missed vasa previa, and there was 2 undiagnosed breaches. A total of 7 of the 45 deaths involved a failed instrumental delivery, and that's just to name a few. Outside of these trends, there are numerous trends related to bank holiday weekends where missed medical interventions because of staff unavailability. And back labour was also another one that were voiced in regards to women's experience where they were ignored. In 2014, it only took 5 baby deaths in Portlaoise, which led to what they call the Portlaoise baby scandal, that provoked the then Health Minister, James O'Reilly, to jump into his car with his CMO and meet the women affected and ordered a review of avoidable baby deaths between 2016 and 2012. And from there, these reviews, reports and investigation founded our country's first national maternity strategy. Yet here we are, a decade later, and at least 45 babies have died that are in the public domain via inquests, and that number, 45, is in 9 years. There's 56 between 2012 and 2022, and those are all only ones that went through inquest. So the trends are there across all of these cases. We are going to just go into a little bit about shared experience from the service user in general, and highlight what the families feel. The families feel that the investigative process within our health service executive system is unfair and it's unjust. The families highlight that their loved ones' lives are simply disregarded, and they feel that their human rights and their dignity are not considered. Families feel their lives and their futures are viewed and used as extended timelines through fear-mongering, and they feel that the years of trauma-induced post-traumatic stress through the lengthy, controlling and silenced culture of a deny and defend is an additional unnecessary trauma due to that hindrance and lack of open disclosure. They feel that there is no accountability, that staff are not held accountable for their roles in negligent cases, and in many cases families have highlighted that staff involved in their care have left the country so that they do not have to face any culpability. And so we believe that the only way forward is an inquiry, one that is external to the health service executive. I stand here today representing these families across our nation, and we have lost our children, we've lost our mothers, and those who care for their child who's also suffered a preventable and avoidable birth injury. And we continue to ask the same questions. Some are waiting years for answers, and some are still asking decades later. The panel alongside me today will go into depth into the emotional and traumatic cost of these families and the financial cost of having to endure years of our system's investigations. But we wonder why are reviews completed by colleagues of staff involved and not an external independent statutory body like the An Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission. In some cases we are lucky enough to have our files in full and not have documents removed or altered where they would highlight the case management failings. So we're here basically at your mercy, and the same way we're at the mercy of the HSE and experienced medical care, at the mercy for fair and just investigations, and also for long-term bereavement and counselling services. All the system seems to want to do is very quickly and quietly turn another page on yet another tragic chapter in Ireland's maternity standards, and we hope that we will just go, and they hope that we will just go away. But we are not going anywhere. We feel enough is enough. We need to stop preventable deaths, and we ask for you all to stand with us and call for an immediate national independent inquiry, and for those facts and findings to be released. Thank you very much.
Me to speak today. So I'm from Ames Island, the Association for Improvements in the Maternity Services. Been around for quite a long time. I said to some of the people outside the door, make sure that my banner gets saved, because I've lost 2 Ames Island banners here over the last 15 years protesting outside the door for maternity care. So they assure me it's going to be safe. So in my 23 years as a maternity care advocate, there used to be this mantra that was very often put out here in Ireland, and that was that Ireland is the safest place to give birth. You used to hear that a lot. Yeah, you're nodding, Roisin, you hear it a lot. We don't hear it very much anymore. And I put to you that the reason we don't hear it very much anymore, even though we'd like it to be true, is because it's not true anymore. I'm not even sure if it was true before, but I can categorically say that Ireland is not the safest place to give birth in. We've got quite a long way to go. And I'm asking if it was ever true because of the way that we define safety. So we define safety in our Irish maternity services by mere mortality. So it's defined by whether a baby and a mother survived or not. So it's a very, very crude measurement. It's probably the most crude measurement you could use to define whether something is safe or not. There is no audit of morbidity at all. So there's no audit of when you might have a slight injury or you might have a slight emotional or mental problem. We don't even keep records of the number of people who have postnatal depression. I mean, that is not something that is particularly unusual. We estimate that 1 in 5 people will experience that. So we can have a maternity services in which large numbers of people are regularly traumatised and we wouldn't know it. From what we know in other countries, it's very likely that this is the case. And guess what? We're just letting it happen as if we've come to accept this as a ritualised experience of giving birth. AIMS-Ireland run a support service for people who've had a difficult maternity care experience. And about 30% of all the calls that we receive are from people who have been emotionally, mentally and physically traumatised during their maternity care experience. We know from research carried out in the Rotunda last year, involving over 1,100 women, that 20% of them experienced trauma. It is estimated that 4,000 people who give birth in Ireland every year will be traumatised. And what happens to all of these traumatised people? Well, they don't just disappear, they don't fade away. They do what is going to be classified in my book as probably the most difficult job, even more difficult than being Minister of Health. What they do is they become parents. So it's very difficult to become parents full stop. Becoming first-time parents, those of us who have done it will remember how difficult that experience is because you become a new person. You have to meet a lot of new challenges. But if you have to meet those challenges and you're suffering from injuries yourself, or your child has been injured, or you have lost a child and you have other children in your family, and all the various multiplications of those different scenarios, it's extremely difficult to parent under those circumstances. The average cost, we know this from a study in the UK, the average cost to society of one case of perinatal depression is £74,000, of which 23,000 relates to care for the mother or the birthing person, and 51,000 relates to the amount of services and care that has to be put into providing for the child, because the child will also suffer as a result of that trauma. In the UK this year, there was a parliamentary inquiry into birth trauma, and I'm just going to leave that hang there. And the other thing, of course, is that these very difficult situations don't affect people equally. We know that those who are marginalised and those who are migrants in our society and those who are people of colour are more likely to be affected. And we know this specifically with respect to our maternal death figures. So safety and experience matter. We know that people have very different and difficult experiences from many, many childbirth surveys. So the first survey that was carried out here in Ireland, specifically on informed consent, was carried out by AIMS in 2007, followed by other surveys carried out in 2009, 2010, 2014. In 2015, the Maternity Strategy Steering Group, of which I was a part, requested that the IPA carried out another similar survey. In 2020, we have the National Maternity Experience Survey. In 2022, the National Maternity Bereavement Experience Survey. And this year, yet another survey from the University of Limerick. So different people taking their time to fill out different surveys with marginally different statistics, with different coloured pie charts and different coloured bars and bar graphs. But the story is essentially the same. Women are not being listened to in our maternity care services, and our services do not offer sufficient choice of care provider. So what do our maternity services look like? Our maternity service is incredibly highly medicalised, and it got more so during COVID. Unnecessarily so, we believe. When I had my first baby in 2000, the caesarean section rate at my local hospital, which I think we can just sing to from here, which is the NMH, was 14%, 1-4. And there was horror that the rate in the Rotunda, which was over the river, had gone over the 20% mark. The WHO advocates that a rate below 15% means that babies and mothers might be dying unnecessarily, but that a rate over 15% would indicate that the procedure is being performed, but there is absolutely no benefit to mother, to baby, or to society by those procedures. So our current rate, we know, for both first time, second time and subsequent mothers is 37% now in Ireland. In some months, in some units, that rate is 65%. We have the 5th highest caesarean section rate in OECD countries, and complementing that, we have induction rates that are easily over 45% in most units for first-time parents, and well over 50 or 60% in some units. In October 2023, we initiated a new national induction policy that is going to make induction even more prevalent, recommending that everybody be induced by 41 weeks gestation. So the purpose of all this medicalisation is to make births safer. That is the purpose of this. But, well, hello, it actually hasn't. There has been no corresponding drop in infant or maternal mortality with increasing intervention. But there has been an increasing number of trauma cases. In fact, if we look at recent figures from the UK, where the intervention rates have also increased since COVID, there has actually been an increase, a documented increase, in infant mortality. For infants under 1 year of age, the report shows the death rate increased from 3.6 per 1,000 live births in 2022 to 3.8 in 2023. The death rate for the poorest went up from 5.4 per 1,000 in 2022 to 5.9 in 2023. So this was more than twice that of infants in the least deprived neighbourhoods. So you can see that deprivation plays a big role there. Now, those aren't figures from Ireland, but I'm sure that our figures would not be too dissimilar. When our medicalisation rates are questioned, we're told it's because women are old and fat and infertile. Great. And it's us that's the problem. But I can tell you that there are many skinny young women being put through aggressively medicalised birth experiences, and you can take it upon yourself to go through the CSO figures from the 1950s, 60s, 70s and even the 40s, and you will find that women have traditionally always given birth in Ireland in their 40s, and they have done it safely without the aggressive amount of medicalisation that they are being put through now. So that brings me, I guess, to my questions for you. How satisfied are you that our maternity services are safe, 100% safe? Well, if you're not sitting there bathed in golden light and feeling super comfortable and thinking, yes, 100% safe, yes, willing to stake my life on it's safe, then something is demanded of you. Firstly, we need your support for an independent inquiry, and we need it now. We need to identify exactly what is happening, where and by whom. It's uncomfortable, but necessary. That inquiry will bring learning and information and a better service. The report into Port Leisure in 2014 led to the National Maternity Strategy, as Claire has said, and it changed the terms of bereavement support as well. It was uncomfortable, but it brought many answers. Secondly, I ask you, how can we make birth safer? And here's a clue. It's not by putting in more machinery that goes beep. It's about an investment in individualised care, about continuity of care, about moving away from routine medicalisation and looking and listening to the person that sits in front of you. It's about women-centred care, which Ireland pays a lot of lip service to, but very rarely does. It's also about more investment in human resources, investment in midwives and doctors, investment in choice, investment in care pathways, and a lot less about routine intervention. And guess what? There actually is a roadmap for this in the National Maternity Strategy, but most of the issues have not been implemented, and most of the people who advocate for it have not been listened to. So for those of you that are here, these are your choices. You can sit here day in, day out until the next election and convince yourself that everything is grand and do nothing. That's option one. It's worked for others in the past, and I'm sure it can work for you. Or you can feel uncomfortable today, go back and talk to your peers and people you work with and then forget about it and do nothing. I guess that's option two. But I put it to you that if you're not 100% convinced that our maternity service is 100% safe, then it is your moral, ethical and political duty to do something about it, and that is option three. Do not be under any illusion that this is not a manifesto issue either, because it is. And all of you that are looking for re-election better be prepared to answer to this situation on the doorsteps in the coming months, because birth affects everybody in Ireland. We all have to be born. Thank you.
Speech, which is probably addictive of how busy I am at the moment with the number of cases that I'm dealing with infant injuries, perinatal maternal injuries. I've worked in maternity, probably alongside Krisha, for about 22 years as an advocate, working on the coalface of birth education, educating mothers and midwives, and then I transferred over to law because I felt I couldn't really instrument change from that side, so I thought it would be a better idea for me to try and go down the legal route to try and hold people accountable, but we're overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed with cases, so I have notes but not a speech, so hopefully it'll make sense. So what I wanted to draw attention to is the legal battles that parents and bereaved parents have to endure when they do embark on taking on legal action. So these cases can take anything from 2 years to 7 years, and the cost to the state for those legal infractions go into the hundreds of thousands of euros. Both infant injury and infant death cases and maternal injury and maternal death cases have huge financial costs. Each case, as I said, can last for years, and it's fees for the solicitors, fees for the barristers, and there's your expert witnesses. So every case would have at least 2 expert witnesses, each costing minimum 5,000 euros per report, and there's normally 3 or 4 on each side. So the state would have their expert witnesses, the plaintiff, the claimant would have their expert witnesses. So we're talking around 40,000 in expert witness costs even before anything gets off the ground. You then have potentially 4 or 5 years of legal summations going backwards and forwards, motions for discovery, each costing a few hundred euros a time. If you're very lucky, you will then go into mediation. So the plaintiff, the claimant, and the state office will normally go into mediation to try and mediate a settlement. Again, that's a huge cost. Now we're talking about 3 or 4 years down the line before that happens, and it normally only happens just before a trial date is due. So it's kind of that last minute. I've been in cases on numerous occasions where the settlement happens in court or outside the door of the court. Again, that's a whole day's court costs. So if it does go into trial, we're looking at high court costs, not district court costs, not circuit court costs. We're looking at high court costs. So we're looking at potentially around 80,000 euros per day in costs for each day each trial goes on. There are many families that can't afford to go down this route. So some, you really have to only take on cases that you know you're going to win. So there are many families that don't ever see this justice at the end. They have no financial resources in order to bring these cases to court. So there are so many that we don't know about because people don't have either the finances or the emotional strength to bring them through. And the emotional toll on the parents is huge. As I said, it could be 6, 7 years before these cases actually see the light of day. And what happens at the end of them? They're normally all settled. So this is after hundreds of thousands of euros have been spent. The cases are normally settled. I can't reveal the settlement amounts, but they go again into the hundreds of thousands of euros for each case. The emotional toll on the families, once they get to that point, some of them are just looking for a admission of liability. It really never comes. It never comes. They get an apology, but they never get an admission of liability. And for them, that's huge. The financial burden will never really, the financial payouts will never really compensate for a lost mother or a lost child. So, will I stop there and let the next person go on? Will I?
There's a lot of questions that will be asked.
Yeah, just very quickly, my rationale behind this from working from the other side is why is this happening? Why is this happening in our hospitals? I've worked with midwives for the last 40 years. And from my take, the system itself is completely not fit for purpose anymore. Midwives are completely burnt out. They're working in a highly toxic environment. They suffer from emotional burnout. They are gaslighting these women.
they're not doing it because they don't love their job, they do it because they can't actually take anymore, they're traumatised themselves. One thing I'll just finish with at the moment, the gaslighting that some of these women will talk about when they're not believed or not spoken, or their concerns aren't taken into account. Here's one of them. I have terrible back pain. That's Savita. We all know Savita, that was her first complaint when she went in, and she was sent home and told to have physiotherapy. Her husband reported that his wife looked really pale, and it said it wasn't obvious because she was Indian, and that was married. She died at 28 years old, so he wasn't listened to when he explained that his wife looked pale. So from my reckoning, one of the big things that we really need to do in this inquiry is to see what midwives' life is like working in a maternity system, because they suffer from so much bullying in a toxic workplace culture themselves that they leave and they end up gaslighting, they end up coercively controlling women, and they end up performing interventions without informed consent, and this is where it all begins. So thank you.
I won't have an entire speech either. I'm one of the founders and the volunteers of SaferBirthsIreland, and we are incredibly busy, very sadly too. My name is Mary Creakin, and in 2006 I'm going to give you some of the personal loss now of stillbirth and neonatal death, and preventable especially. In 2006 I had a little girl, Liliana. She was stillborn. I hadn't been listened to, introduced and changed fetal movement, and I was in my 40s at that stage where I kind of knew what was going on. But anyway, Liliana was stillborn at full term and became a statistic. She became a statistic in 2006, and that was the time that stillbirths were actually falling in Ireland, the rates were. And they fell until 2012, and then they plateaued, and as we know, we spoke there, we had a number of inquiries. And then in 2018, it's shocking for us to know that they're actually on the rise again, year on year. If that's happening, what I'm absolutely horrified by, and my colleagues here with me from Féileacáin, is that our stories that happened years and years ago are happening again. 18 years after I lost my child the way I lost her, I'm hearing at support meetings that people are presenting, women are presenting at the maternity units and told to go home, told to have a hot, they're saying there's something wrong, my movements aren't right. Go home, have a hot bath or a cold drink. If I threw hot water up on you or cold water, you'd wriggle too. That doesn't mean the baby is well. And the education that we have is not the knowledge we have. We know this, so why aren't our midwives that you were talking about there, why aren't they being told about this? You know, it's why you do not send women home. The outcomes are very poor, then the baby will die, and then we come to the situation where the support and the gaslighting. And so many of us in this situation, for me I've just let it go because I've never been able to resolve it, that I should have shouted louder, I should have said more, but I didn't. And I've let it go. There's lots of women that don't let it go, and they go down the road of postnatal depression, they have traumatic reactions, it comes out in their parenting. And this is a huge cost to the state in money, but the emotional cost is what we see in Féileacáin. And the suffering, I'm not possessed of language, I can tell you the suffering that's there for the women who blame themselves for the death of their child, trying to parent afterwards, or if they are of an age where and if they've only this child, they try to have another child, there's all the infertility stuff. I could be here till tomorrow, and I know we don't have time to tell you what it's like for those women. And when the baby dies, we have the reviews. What is the value of those reviews when the same thing happens again in the same hospital with the same circumstances? Again, I don't know what to say about that. 14 years and 14 days after my daughter died, her little nephew died as well in the same hospital, and it was a different situation. She got excellent care and she got excellent support. She got support from the Féileacáin family, but also from her own family, who understood what it means if you're supported around the time your baby dies. But that support is not universal. If you're in one hospital, you will get very good support, bereavement support, but you won't in another hospital. We know again that the value of the care at the time your baby dies will dictate the trajectory of your grief over years. So why is that not universal? Why can't we have the same situation in Cork as we would in Dublin or Donegal? I know I have to leave you now, and I suppose the one thing I would leave you with is we're in a place of power here, we're in a place, you've got the ears, if you're not TD yourself or Senator, you've got the ear of them. We're asking for one thing, if there was a concerted effort for all of us to make birth safer, it can be done. We've seen we have the research, we have all of the knowledge. Why can't we train our midwives in this? Why can't we help the midwives to care for our women, for our parents? That's it really. Again, when my grandson died, I realised that support works. Why aren't we funding that? Why are we letting our parents slip into mental health? They're slipping into mental illness because they're not being supported. And I suppose I just got very angry with what I heard today, and I hope you support us, because really it's an absolute scandal the way that women are dying, babies are dying, and they will tell you that look, babies will die for no reason. They don't. They die for reasons that we don't know.
Hi everyone, my name is SaferBirthsIreland. I'm co-founder of SaferBirthsIreland. I have 2 pages here, but I'll try and keep it really brief because I know everyone probably has lots of questions. I just wanted to thank Roisin for arranging this for us today, and for the ladies Lisa and Claire, SaferBirthsIreland, for putting this all together. It's tremendous work and a really, really difficult subject, as we've just heard. Just a bit about SaferBirthsIreland. We are an intersectional movement representing and respecting the interests and choice of all those accessing maternity care, and our aim is to focus and highlight the urgent need for a human rights-based approach to pregnancy and childbirth in Ireland. I'm going to skip over, I had a lot of statistics, and Krisha touched on a lot of those. Skyrocketing rates of induction, C-sections, as we heard, 40 to 50% across all of our maternity hospitals. Snapshot from 2023 in the Rotunda showed that 28% of first-time mothers had an instrumental birth, and that's either forceps or the kiwi, as it's called. 48% of first-time mothers were induced, and 41% of first-time mothers had C-sections. In University Maternity Hospital Limerick, where I actually gave birth twice myself, 45% of first-time mothers had C-sections in 2023, while in 2019 the number was only 37.3, so that has increased 7% in only 5 years. Just a bit about University Hospital Limerick as well, where I gave birth in 2021. I spent the majority of that year fighting maternity restrictions, well after all of the COVID restrictions had lapsed. My husband didn't get to hear the heartbeat of our baby, didn't get to come to any appointments, was not there for support, and was only allowed in when I actually gave birth for an hour, and then was straight to leave after that. 2 days after I gave birth, she was taken to NICU, and I was left all alone for hours, without support, without anyone checking me, without my husband by my side. And I was told afterwards, after I made a very thorough and detailed complaint, as is my nature, that we don't routinely give support or counselling to women whose babies have been taken to NICU. You seemed fine antenatally, which is before you give birth, so we didn't think it was going to be an issue. This is not a way to assist women and to give support that they need after they have been through a traumatic incident such as that. Some other statistics were released there just last week into cesarean sections, again showing shockingly high rates, which are well above the WHO recommendations. And as we heard already, that anything above 10-15% does not equal a good outcome and does not improve outcomes. Also released recently was a report by the Non-Consultant Hospital Doctor Task Force, part of the IMO, into working conditions, and they stated that 83% are routinely working illegally long shifts in contravention of the Organisation of Working Time Act. It's not conducive to good care, and it's definitely not conducive to evidence-based decision making. They have asked, the IMO has requested that midwives be exempt from the HSC staffing recruitment moratorium, owing to the extreme shortage of midwives in our maternity units. And overworked, seriously under-resourced maternity units translate to adverse conditions for those giving birth. As mentioned earlier as well, we, Birth Rights Alliance, are partnering with the University of Limerick to do research on these interventions and skyrocketing intervention rates. So in November, December of last year, we conducted a survey. We received 3,824 respondents to that survey. The results that we received back were stark, and they paint a picture of a system which does not represent the autonomy or choice of women giving birth. We're currently analysing all of this data, and it will take some time. We are only volunteers, with only one member who's actually employed to do this, so bear with us as we go through it. what we have found from our very early analysis was that a total of 43% of respondents were not aware that they could decline vaginal examinations in pregnancy, 44% felt pushed into their care options, and 24% did not feel that they chose the care that they received. And I have a quote here, and it kind of echoes what has been said already from one of the respondents. Honestly, the experience felt like I was forced to comply, but that it was dressed up as I chose to do it. So these figures and that feedback do not speak of a system which respects pregnant people's choices or one that is obtaining truly informed consent. And finally, I just want to touch again on something that has already been highlighted, and that is the fact that migrant women, black women, women of colour, are facing much harsher realities in our maternity systems than white women are. So inquests in maternal deaths, which were really hard fought for by the Elephant Collective, have returned a death by medical misadventure in 13 instances from 2007 until 2021. Of these 13, 6 were women of colour, and that number is most likely to rise again as there are currently more ongoing inquests. We know that women of African descent are more than twice as likely as those of white Irish descent to have stillbirth, and the perinatal statistics report from 2020 states that women of African nationality have a stillbirth rate of 6.4 versus 3.7 for white Irish women, a perinatal mortality rate of 10.2 versus 3.8. And in 2021, when pressed on the issue, the HSE stated that while the numbers appear large, they're not remarkable and put the onus on women to integrate more. I would call having a perinatal mortality rate almost 3 times higher than white Irish women more than remarkable, but I would call it shocking, disturbing and damning, and something is very wrong in our maternity system and our hospitals, but the HSE and the government have yet, to this date, not initiated an investigation. So all these statistics, all these stories, and you know, I really, really do want to put my hat off to these women coming here today. Once again, Irish women having to bear our personal stories and our personal grief and trauma in order to get change. That we are joining you in the SaferBirths campaign and asking the government to open an independent national inquiry into maternal and baby deaths and catastrophic birth injuries. The women and birthing people of Ireland deserve a maternity system which puts them at the centre of all decision making. Enough with the platitudes, we want action.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much to SaferBirthsIreland, to Claire and to Lisa for including me to be here for this important launch, and thank you very much to Deputy Roisin Shortall and your office for facilitating this very special venue. I can't think of a more privileged place to be, and particularly the day that's in it, and I hope what you've heard today will resonate in bringing attention to the calls to action of SaferBirthsIreland for safer, better and equal access to maternal and infant health care, and to prevent and avoid avoidable deaths. Following on from my fellow speakers, I'd like to touch on 3 subjects. Firstly, our coroner's legislation. Secondly, the care costs associated with caring for a catastrophically birth injured child. And finally, what we can hope to expect from the enactment of the long-awaited Patient Safety Act 2023. Section 2 of the Coroners Act 1962, this is a bit of a mouthful, as amended by the Coroners Amendment Act 2019, in Section 3 provides for what actually constitutes the definition of a stillbirth. A stillborn child, and I'm sorry if this is upsetting people today, a stillborn child means a child of not less than 24 weeks gestation or of a birth weight of not less than 500 grams delivered without signs of life. That's the only definition we have in our legislation with regard to a stillbirth. In my personal opinion, this definition is very limited, if not arbitrary, and I'd like to read for you parts of a very considered letter I received a number of years ago from the Dublin City Coroner when I requested an inquest in such a case. I believe all of you, and indeed the Minister for Justice, further to her recent commitment to review the coroner's legislation, will find this very compelling. The letter states, I make my determination in this case that I have no jurisdiction to hold an inquest, mindful there are no Irish cases in this area of law arising in the context of the legislative and constitutional changes brought about by the repeal of the 8th Amendment to assist me, or that might directly assist me. It goes on, it will not be until the Irish courts have ruled on such matters that there will be certainty as to the coronial jurisdiction in such a case. However, nothing in the above is prejudicial to your client's ability to seek consideration of these complex matters in another forum. For the legal experts among us, the reference to another forum suggests This definition could certainly be challenged through the legal process known as judicial review. So again, some pause for thought and something for the Department of Justice to hopefully reflect upon today. Turning to catastrophic birth injury cases, I believe we will all agree every case is different and must be treated as such, notwithstanding the vast modalities of data from the State Claims Agency decrying the escalating costs of litigation in this complex, drawn out and extremely challenging area of medical negligence litigation. Every parent here will agree no two children are the same, healthy or otherwise, and every parent naturally wants the very best for their child. That is why a case-by-case approach is needed, if not exigent, where the individual needs of the child are paramount and his or her parents are listened to first and foremost. As part of my address today, I was asked to consider the annual yearly expense of caring for a child catastrophically injured through birth. In my experience, this depends upon the extent, in other words, the severity of the injuries suffered, the psychological, physical injuries. As you know, most court awards financial settlements are primarily made up of care costs, which must be considered by accountants, actuaries and even economists to calculate what's known as the real rate of return. In other words, the annual rate of return on an investment taken into consideration after taxes and inflation. In recent years, there has been much debate and controversy about the real rate of return formula due to fluctuating inflation rates, interest rates, ongoing geopolitical upheaval, as well as what we've all come to know as the cost of living crisis. In turn, the lack of an agreed real rate of return formula has led to diversely and sometimes divisively different approaches as to whether a catastrophically birth-injured child who has been the victim of admitted or proved negligence should receive a lump sum payment or periodic payments over the course of his or her life. Despite our population reaching now 5.2 million people, the huge increases in health services funding and spending over the last number of years have not brought about the same or comparable levels of increases in productivity in our hospitals. And the girls today have spoken to you very eloquently and passionately about that. And also this is an issue recently acknowledged by the Department of Health and the HSE in the task force they've set up. In my experience, the current undercompensation of catastrophically birth-injured children incentivises the State Claims Agency to settle cases by way of lump sums rather than periodic payments. In turn, this means that the proposed legislation to provide for appropriately indexed periodic payments is unlikely to ever get off the ground. As one might expect, agreeing a formula for the application of this real rate of return is an issue which the State Claims Agency seems reluctant to tackle, and it's therefore arguable it does not want our courts to set the applicable formula, as that might be perceived as relinquishing too much financial control of public funds. This is understandable, but the result is catastrophically birth-injured children and their families face perpetual uncertainty, years and years of back-breaking litigation, and they are literally hostages to fortune in trying to bring their child's litigation to a final conclusion for the sake and to attain a better quality of life. I should add here, life expectancy is another critically important factor in these types of cases, and I'm sorry to say, a hugely contested area of medicine and science for obvious reasons. So, to answer the question, in my experience, the current annual cost of caring for a catastrophically birth-injured child can range from anything from 25,000 to 50,000 euros per annum. Again, this depends upon the physical and psychological needs and how much medical, therapeutic and occupational treatment supports and resources the child can avail of through the public health system. Breaking down these figures, a fair estimate of the cost of employing a caregiver is in the regions of 750 to 1,000 euros per week for life, with the cost of basic appliances and aids coming in at roughly 100 euros per week for life. In my experience, there is absolutely no question the day-to-day expenses associated with caring for a catastrophically birth-injured child are the biggest expense. And those of you who have come through this process, this litigation process, or who are currently in the midst of it, the cost of the primary carer's care is largely overlooked, taken as read, put to the bottom of the pile. This is a recurring problem, which I have a big problem with. It resonates very strongly with me as a legal practitioner and on a human level. So lastly, on a lighter note, the Patient Safety Act of 2020.
The Carers Association are coming in here at 4 o'clock. for a debate that's taking place in the morning.
So, just in relation to the Patient Safety Act, sorry, thank you. All I want to say is about open disclosure. This Act has been on the books and has yet to be enacted, brought into law since over a year. I'm calling on the government here today, I'm calling upon all our deputies, all our politicians to get this Act enacted, to get it in force, in operation, to operate mandatory open disclosure. Because if it's not, there are still going to be deaths in hospital settings that will go unreported, uninvestigated, and there will be no accountability for families. So thank you all very much.
Thanks. I think you certainly shone a light on a very, very wide area, and each of you have, presented on different aspects of that wide area. Very conscious of the next group doing it. I did say earlier to you about the facility for dog questions. I think there is an issue there about data, and I commend those of you that have managed to collect data. I think it's really important for us to have that here in terms of making that case for an inquiry, a look back, or an examination of this whole issue. But one of the ways of getting data is through dog questions, and I, and I'm sure others, are more than happy to facilitate that. If you talk to us, give us a buzz, and we'll talk to you just about that actual process. I'm really sorry that we have to rush it now at this point, but it's a very important group coming in, just like yourselves. I would make the point, and I think Lizanne was talking about this huge cost of litigation. We hear about those costs and the cost for the State Claims Agency a lot, but very few people look back at that and say, well, what is the root cause of this? Why is it that women are not being listened to? Why is it that we have such dysfunction within our health service? And why is there still that paternalism that exists in relation to women's health? So look, there's a huge number of areas there. We'll take it up after this session. All right, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.